there was a lot of talk about, well, it's going to go to appeal, and we'll see if this really happens. How did it end up like here? Who was really defending this? Were they saying the right arguments? And we'll talk about those, and we'll have our opinions, right? But what happened was just coming up to that judgment, and then subsequent to that, some of these major brokerages said, you know what? We need to get past this. Let's settle. And so there were settlements.
Welcome to Get Real 411, the podcast where real experts give real advice on all things real estate. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Brad.
Join us as we explore real estate successes and pitfalls through the eyes of our esteemed guests.
Now let's get real.
Season 2 of Get Real 411. So I'm excited to start off with just, you see our new backgrounds, a fireside chat, just between you and I. There's a lot going on in the real estate industry right now, and we want to dive into it, but we want to dive into it in a way where we can talk about, really what has happened, what's in the news, but then share our thoughts on it and really get into opinions. As what we're going to get into today, I've got a lot of strong opinions on, and I just wanted to get those out there and get them recorded for our audience, but also, to just share, a different point of view. Everybody's going to have a different opinion on this. Things are still happening, and we don't know where we'll land exactly, but let's just dig in. So, here we go. Season 2, right?
Absolutely. The reason I love the fact that we're going to talk about the NAR settlement today is there's so much chatter around it, so much uncertainty around it. And the reason that I'm so excited to talk with you is because between the two of us, we've got over 30 years of experience in the industry, having seen many legislative decisions that have affected our industry, sure. Much of the same kind of fear-based uncertainty. And based on that, it's interesting because this particular settlement has a bit of a ripple effect in many different facets of our industry. And so I'm really interested to break it down. I think there are some areas that you and I are completely in agreement on, and other areas where we have a little bit of a different opinion, and it's really anybody's guess how it's all settled, yeah. Right?
So let's, I think what we should do is, for our audience, you said NAR, but this really is the National Association of Realtors, had a groundbreaking settlement that they agreed to last Friday. So it was Friday, what was that, the 18th or something?
No, it was the 15th.
What was it? The 15th?
The 15th, March 15th.
Okay, so the 15th, so March 15th, 2024, they announced the settlement, and so it became public knowledge. We'll get into what that actually means and where we're at, but why don't we roll the clocks back about 4 years ago and just kind of share what I know about what I'd been reading over this period of time and so forth. So there were some lawsuits that were, they received class action status, that were about real estate agent commissions. And what it really boils down to is the claim was that sellers were not able to negotiate commissions that they were paying for on the buyer's behalf, meaning the buyer agent commissions. So traditionally, in real estate, if you list your property with a listing agent, they would take a commission agreement, and depending on the state you're in, higher cost states, the commission's typically a little bit less as a standard, and lower cost states, they may be a little bit more. But let's just use an example of, say, between 5 to 6%. And they would take a listing agreement at this and tell the seller, hey, I'm going to be giving half this commission to a buyer's agent that comes in and has a buyer that they represent. Now, the question then ensues, hey, what if there is no agent with the buyer? Then what do you do? And depending on the agent and how much value they assign to their time, they may take the full commission and have all of it themselves. And the buyer comes in either unrepresented or what we call dual representation, which means that the listing agent takes on the fiduciary duty of representing both sides, right? And so with that said, that's typically the pitch that would happen with a seller. Now, a seller didn't really know exactly how much was being given or offered to a buyer's agent. Typically, it's been 50%, but that's not always the case. I know agents that have maybe had a 5% listing fee and offered 2% to a buyer's agent. It's really kind of up to them, even though in reality, savvy sellers would know to ask these questions and also know that this is negotiable and that sort of thing. But a lot of sellers just don't really know that, and they're not really told, like, this is a negotiable fee, but this is why I believe I deserve this fee that I'm asking for. So that was the claim here, is that, hey, you as a seller paid these fees to buyer's agents and weren't given the opportunity to negotiate those. And so you just paid them. It came out of your proceeds. Those were launched, these class action lawsuits. Actually, there's one in particular called Sitzer Burnett. These lawsuits take on the name of the kind of initial plaintiffs, and then their class action, and they benefit a lot of people. So what happened is it had gone back and forth. They had named major brokerages in this. They had named NAR. They named some MLSs, and it lasted a long time. And really, I think nobody expected what the outcome was. And the outcome was, in last quarter of 2023, and I don't have exact dates with me, but it really doesn't matter, there was a judgment. It went to jury trial, and there was a judgment in favor of the plaintiff. And the judgment was for $1.7 billion, but because of the type of lawsuit it was, treble damages get applied to it, which made it over a $5 billion settlement. Or not settlement, judgment. Obviously, that's huge. That's just in one state. And so with that said, there was a lot of talk about, well, it's going to go to appeal, and, we'll see if this really happens. How did it end up like here? Who was really defending this? Were they saying the right arguments? And we'll talk about those, and we'll have our opinions, right? But what happened was, just coming up to that judgment and then subsequent to that, some of these major brokerages said, you know what? We need to get past this. Let's settle. And so there were settlements that were done for tens of millions. We're talking about, $53 million, $83 million, in this range. There were several of them that happened just before and just after. So these continued, right? And so during, when that judgment took place, of course, a lot of other people in different states across the nation started to realize there's an opportunity here. So copycat lawsuits or Me Too lawsuits ensued. Class action. California, I think there were 3 alone. I think in total, and it doesn't really matter, but don't quote me on this. I think there were 43 lawsuits in total. It may not be. But that said, it was tantamount to, if there were a judgment of all of these, akin to what happened in the first one, it would total over $500 billion in judgment. So very serious. So obviously, with that said, there were settlement discussions that took place. On Friday of last week, NAR, National Association of Realtors, agreed to a settlement of $418 million. So the cash is one thing, and in the settlement, we'll talk about what was in there, and you can explain it's over 4 years and all that. But the concessions are quite another. So what does this mean as far as changes that have to take place in the industry? One of the things is they agreed to not have an offer of commission on MLSs. So no longer, when this goes into effect, no longer will MLSs publish X amount is going to go to a buyer's agent commission. That will not exist. Secondly, as a buyer's agent, you will be required to have a buyer agreement. Now, these have existed for a long time, but very few agents use them. There are some. I know lots of agents that are like mainly listing agents, but if they take on a buyer, it's like they're not going to waste their time. They're going to have them sign an agreement that says if they show them property, they're going to get paid. But that is a little different than they'll get paid from the commission that was already agreed to on those listings. This is going to be a buyer agreement that says you agree to pay my commissions, right? And there might be some subject twos. Like, this is where we really don't know where this ends up. Like, will it be, hey, I'll sign this agreement with you, but if I don't find something, I'm not going to pay you anything, or am I going to have to pay you a minimum fee anyway just to show me properties? Or, if the seller agrees to a fee that you find to be substandard, you'll accept that and I won't have to supplement. That's where we really don't know where this ends up, but that's going to be a requirement for these buyer agreements, buyer agent agreements. There's some other nuances to this, but those are the broad strokes. And with that, ensue some other problems. So, what are these problems? Let's talk a little bit about, what we know, what you know about our angle of things, which is mortgages. So let's just say, so that they did say that you're still able to negotiate for the seller to pay those commissions. You're still able to have the listing agent offer some of their commissions to the buyer's agent. But what does this mean in practicality? And what are the things that could make it difficult currently with today's mortgages that have limits, right? So, there are a lot of loans that have a limit of 3%?
3 or 6% total seller concessions. And here's where it gets interesting. I've talked about this with some colleagues on the mortgage side, and they said, well, if it's just a seller credit, it's a seller credit. It can be credited to, toward anything. But here's the difference. In the settlement, it specifically says that there are still ways for buyer's agents to get compensated, and it actually uses the term seller concession. Now, here's another part of this that gets a little bit more layered. There are certain type of loans, the VA loan comes to mind, in which the borrower is not allowed to pay for certain things. Agent commissions being one, and those same loans do have limits on the amount of seller concessions. Now, they're usually based upon a percentage of the transaction, not, a dollar amount per se. So let's use the example of a VA offer that comes through after these changes go into effect. And let's assume no changes are made to the settlement and that the court approves it exactly as it is. Well, in that event, the veteran borrower can't pay their agent. So the buyer's agent is going to have to work closely with the seller's agent to make a determination on how they can arrange compensation. And now, because the concessions from the seller are also limited on that loan, they only have so much to work with. So if this is a loan where the veteran also needs a closing cost credit from the seller, where all of these things are now being added together to arrive at that maximum. The other thing you need to know about VA loans, when the Veterans Administration makes a change to a guideline, it's a federal change. It requires approval. It's not like a private investor who can meet with their board of directors and make a change to their guidelines, and it's upon board approval, it's a done deal. So making changes to the guidelines, as an example, is not a small undertaking. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. Speaking as someone who does a lot of work with veterans and a person who has done and continues to do a lot of VA loans, we already, as professionals, have a lot of educational discussions with agents with respect to why the VA offer is not any less appealing than the conventional or the FHA.
Right. Yeah.
What I worry about here is that through these changes, we've actually wound up making it more difficult for our veterans.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That something comes along to change that.
Yeah, so that's a good point on VA loans specifically. If, let's say, it continues to be where they cannot pay agent fees, and you're in a situation where you're writing an offer and the veteran says, well, I need you. You have to pay these fees for my buyer agent. And then there's a conventional offer that comes in and says, well, I've got a little bit of extra cash, so I'll pay, half of my fees. I only want you to pay half of my buyer fees, or I'll cover my buyer agent fees. It puts them in a less appealing situation. So that's a really good point. I do think that, that even previous to this and currently, NAR and other representatives are on Capitol Hill, and they're talking about the changes that have to take place in mortgages to accommodate this sort of thing. Of course, the DOJ was also involved in this, and they were recommending these changes. So, being that there was kind of government already plugged into these commission lawsuits and the settlement, my guess is they're talking about all these things, and they're going to figure it out. And so before we get into it's too cloudy out, let's just say the one thing, which is one way or another, it'll all get figured out, and
Absolutely.
we'll all move on, and we'll just have
Absolutely.
our cheese has moved, but we'll accommodate this. And we'll talk a little bit about how that's akin to what happened in 2008. But you do raise a really good point. So VA loan in particular, other loans, are going to have to change the amounts of concessions. Let me ask you this, because we talked about this before. Do you think that real estate agent commissions will be financeable, meaning that your loan will be able to increase to cover those?
Really torn on the answer to that, and here's why. Affordability has been a pretty big issue as of late. We have home prices that have continued to either stay steady or rise. We have interest rates that had continued to go up from the very, very low, the literal historic lows that we saw back in 2021. And so what we have is an environment where you have high prices and higher rates. You and I both know those. These are nowhere near where they were when we started. But that being said, affordability becomes an issue. And to answer the affordability challenge, many investors and local authorities have come up with down payment assistance programs and grant programs. These programs have already pushed loan to value up, sometimes to 100%, leaving the funding lender no equity in the home going out the gate. Now, where is the room to add financeable agent concessions? I mean, I think that for those lower LTV loans, is it possible that on a very strong conventional loan that they might say, now you can go 3% higher in loan to value than you could have otherwise? But in any case, that loan was never anywhere close to 100. Maybe.
Yeah,
now
maybe. I think what you're saying is, let's say that you're getting a loan and it was pricing out at, let's say, with a 25% down, 75% loan to value, and they'll price it that way, even though you'll go to 70, 5.7% if you're including the broker fees. So maybe, who knows? I think it changes the derivatives. I think it changes the way that, mortgages are sold. So, I'm probably less likely to believe there'll be change there. I think more importantly, you said, look, when you get into these low down payment loans, what are you going to do? Go over 100 again? We did that pre-2008. That didn't work out so well when there's no skin in the game. And so, there might be some inventive things that happen that I still don't think are really consumer friendly. Like, I did read about one Southern California brokerage that's already pushing out that if you can't get the seller to pay our fee, that you can pay it in a monthly payment over a period of time. So can you imagine somebody, so you're a buyer and you're buying a new house, you want to use an agent because you really want their assistance. And then, that was funny, when you grabbed your cup, you grabbed it out of nowhere. And you brought it into, that's great. By the way, I love our new sets. This is our fireside chat set. So we're going to use this when it's just Jamie and I, and we're just having a discussion, but hopefully you guys like it too.
Let me pull my cup out of here
warm
again.
yourself up. So anyway, with that said, I think that, it's kind of crazy to think about that. Like, who's going to really want to have another monthly payment just to pay a commission? So this is a weird period of time.
Now, I got to put my underwriter hat on.
And then is that a payment you have to use?
If I know that the buyer is incurring additional debt, and I know that it is tied to this transaction, we got a whole can of worms. We're not even just talking about qualifying ratios and the fact that, yes, I would consider that in their qualifications. But now, is this secondary financing in some way? Because it is technically, even though there's no note, like, there's so much this could go into.
There is. I mean, look, I think about other things. I mean, I really start to think outside the box. Like, hey, maybe your buyer agent commissions are not paid right away, but they're put as a lien on your property and paid when you sell it down the line. Like, there's all sorts of crazy things I go through. But that said, look, these are challenges. We'll get through them. I'm going to just talk a little bit about 2008. The financial crisis heading into that, 2007, 2008, 2009, and then the Dodd-Frank Act that came out after that. So we lived through this, right? You and I had Mortgage Corporation of America, big company, across the nation. We did wholesale, retail, all of that. Things came crashing down. We didn't make it through. Coming out of that, the industry completely changed. So if you were in the business at that time and you were originating loans and you were a broker, all fingers pointed at you. This was your fault, right? We know that it wasn't. We know that this was Wall Street. This is the product they wanted. We didn't make those decisions. We were delivering those products as originators to them. But that's what happened. So what happened is Fall Guy, the mortgage broker, the originator, gets all the regulation on them. And that regulation, one of the big things was it required that you set your commissions with your funding lender. And you say, this is what I'm going to earn, and you can't make any more, and you can't make any less than that. You can't give concessions to the borrower if you want to help them out. Like, you just can't do any of that. This is what you're going to earn. Pre-2008, when we funded loans, your standard Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA, these loans. And I started in the business in 1993. So from 93 to 2007, let's say, it was pretty standard to make 1% on a loan. If you made 1.5%, that was like a really good loan that paid well. There were some other things that were there earlier on with, service release premiums that we participated in and that sort of thing. But aside from that, that was really the standard. Post 2008, when brokers were supposed to set their commission over a short period of time, that crept up and up and up. The consumer pays a lot more today in margin than they ever did. It went from, say, 1 to 1.5 to 2, 2.5, 3%. In some cases, depending on the organization, might be more than that. But everybody started to make more money. And so that's part of what really hurt the consumer is, the regulators came in. They don't know practically what really happens in an industry. And they set these things thinking they're good for consumers without really thinking about all the ramifications because they don't know it. What they don't know, they don't know. And it hurt them. One of the other things that hurt them was there were these requirements for AMCs. And so an AMC is an appraisal management company. So previous to the mortgage meltdown, originators were allowed to order appraisals through appraisers and things. It still went through diligence. It still went through review and that sort of thing. But I could call John Appraiser, in my neighborhood and say, hey, I just originated a loan. I need an appraisal done and send them out there. What was happening in a lot of cases is they would talk about it and go, I really need the value to come in at this to make this loan work. And, you would see some of these guys elevate those values. And so the government came in and said, nope, not doing that anymore. We're going to have these third-party intermediaries that are going to manage that process. And with that management, there's an extra fee, right? And so you order it through the AMC and they have the relationship. You have no idea what appraiser they send out there, but you wind up paying this additional fee. So it went from where you would have, and this, inflation would have happened anyway, but it went from having in a very short period of time, appraisals cost $250 to $300 to as soon as that happened and that regulation was in place, it went up to $550. So boom.
And guess
cost,
what?
Right? And now it's much higher than that, but inflation and other things. So the reason I bring this up is I think, and now we'll get into some of the opinions, right? And where we think it goes from here and, what's going to happen overall with real estate and with real estate agents, with loan officers and that sort of thing. And so I think through this whole thing, listing agents make more money. And here's why I say that. Again, you might disagree with me, but here's why I say that. I think that the pitch changes. That when you're going to list a property and you're talking to a seller, and that seller, maybe they're not a first-time seller, they're second, third, fourth-time seller. They're used to signing an agreement saying they're going to pay 5% or 5.5% or 6%. And you go in and go, you don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to. We'll negotiate with the buyer's agent if we're going to pay their fee, but the buyer's really responsible for it. So you only have to pay 3%, right? You see what I did there? So look, I went to 3%, but normally I would do 2.5%, right? Because I was doing a 5.5 and I'm splitting it with the buyer agent. That's what I'm making. That went up to 3%. So now I'm going to get, as a listing agent, I'm going to get a little more juice out of it, right? And then the buyer's agent is really going to have to fight to get something, right? And I think that their fee goes down. But ultimately, you go ahead.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. I have something to actually, I'm not sure. I think that what you're saying is a possibility, but this actually adds a support to what you're saying, which is the other part of the conversation is let's remember that the settlement stipulates that the seller's agent can carve out a portion of their compensation. Now, listening about the process of listing a home, right? We both bought and sold many homes. You sit down before you have a buyer and you agree with your agent that this is the commission. Well, in today's world, we know with these changes coming through that the only commission you're talking about at that point is your listing agent's commission. You're not talking about. So I'm a listing agent. What if I say, you know what? Why don't we write in 5% to me, and then I'll just carve out the portion of my compensation to cover the buyer's agent? Well, then at that point, what if the buyer's agent is able to be negotiated at 1.5?
Well, then you have the same problem. You just haven't published it, right? So it is interesting, that nuance to it. And I just don't think that the pitch will be take a listing agreement at a higher amount, and I'm going to give this amount to a buyer's agent. I just don't think it's going to go there, at least not initially. It certainly could. It could be like nothing changes. We're going to take listing agreements at 5%. And, when I communicate with the buyer's agent, I'm going to tell them I'm going to give them 2.5. I just don't think it's going to go there. I think that we go all the way to, I'm going to be compliant, and I'm only going to take this listing agreement for my fee, and that's it. And because it's so much less than what's been traditionally, I think I'm able to get a little more. That's where I think.
Well,
I'd be wrong.
And, this is the part that really is so tough. The buyer's agent is the agent that's now going to have to fight so hard for their compensation. And quite honestly, in my experience, especially with clients of ours that have relocated from other places, buyer's agent is the agent that they need. The buyer's agent is the one who knows the area, who can advise them on school districts and neighborhoods. And so it's tough that the buyer's agent who's out there pounding the pavement, showing homes, doing the research, helping their clients understand the area that they're planning to move to, that's the person who has to fight so hard for their compensation. That's a really tough one.
It is. Look, that you and I align on. I've said for a long time that I think that the buyer's agent brings far more value to the transaction than the listing agent. And it's not to put listing agents down. Some of them are absolutely fantastic, and they really do know more about a neighborhood and more about what they should list a property for, and excellent negotiators and all that sort of thing. But I think from a seller's point of view, and I have personal experience with this, a lot of them think like, I know my home. I know what it's worth. I know what my neighbor sold their house for. I know what I've done to mine. I know what I want for it. Like, I can do this myself, right? And we'll talk about how that ties into HomePie. But to your point, if I'm moving from California to Tennessee, and I've only been there visiting, traveling, that sort of thing, and I decide I'm going to buy a home there, unless I go there and I get, put my boots on the ground, I spend, a couple of weeks there, I drive around, I ask people, I kind of have a friend out there who shows me that sort of thing. I don't know what neighborhood I want to be in. Even if you look online, you go on Zillow or, Realtor.com or Homes or any of these, like, you can only learn so much. You can only Google so much. Do you really know that neighborhood over one block is really not the neighborhood you really want to be in? Or maybe I've got kids that are 2 and 4 years old, and I want to be around a neighborhood where they're all younger. Like, how do you figure that out online? You need that neighborhood expert to help you with that. So I don't think that goes away, but I think it morphs. And I think it morphs into a situation where you kind of have like a tour guide, right? And maybe it is hourly. Maybe it's something else. Again, this is all, we're just discussing this, like, who knows where it's going to land, but maybe that's the alternative. Maybe the commission is just like a bonus, but maybe they get paid to, like, hey, yeah, I'll show you, for the next 6 hours today, I'll show you around, teach you this whole, and you'll pay me $500.
Like a consultant almost, right? Like an area consultant. That's a wild path, but I mean, hey, anything is possible. This is our dynamic.
This is why we're riffing,
with
right?
Crazy visions of the things that could be, and then I sit here going, okay, which one do I think is likely?
Right.
I don't know. It's all a guess.
None of these, but
right?
This is what
Nothing
could happen.
could be done.
The reason I tap into that is kind of a possibility is about 5 years ago, my wife and I went on a cruise down Greece. It was a great cruise, and she decided she wasn't going to use the cruise tours, right? Because it become just kind of one of those, like, they just do them all over and over and over again, and it's just templatized, and it's just not great. So she found an app called Tours by Locals. And in that app, they have like everything you would expect when you're hiring somebody online. They had reviews, and they had like a little video that they did describing what they do and how. But these are people that live in these neighborhoods that you're visiting, that know them inside and out, and you basically connect with them. So we set this up at every port. They come out, they meet with you when you get off the boat, and they go, okay, we're going to go here, 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 and here. And they know all the people, all the stops, so they get you kind of front of line. They like their friends and that sort of thing that are working at the tourist stops. That was the best experience that we ever had. And we really learned way more than we would have learned if we were like one in this group of 50 people doing the cruise tour. So the reason I think about that is like, you kind of need that type of person, which is the real estate agent. That's that neighborhood specialist, right? But does it take on a different form? Does it not be that, and this, it could be long off, but is it something different where you pay for that service, or, you know, you pay for different services from them? If you want them to write the offer, negotiate, that's a different level of service. I don't know. There's just so many different places this can go. But let's kind of shift for a moment and talk about what this means for the future of real estate. Because when you have something like this that happens every 30, 40, 50 years, it's a seismic change, right?
Yep.
And I would call this seismic. This is a big, big change in the way that real estate agents perform, that buyers and sellers interact. It typically causes something to advance the industry. What is that advance? What's the next step?
I agree. So, and I think that you and I know, very plugged into this stuff, the rumblings have been happening for a long time. The consumer behavior has been evolving for a very long time. Let's break it down into the simplest possible example. How available is home data today online at no cost to consumers as compared, for example, to the days when an MLS listing book came out every week and the only people that had it were licensed agents, and they knew what was for sale? Redfin, so these companies where you can literally sit there at your own computer or on your phone as a consumer, and I'm going to check for Charlotte, North Carolina. Here's all my criteria. I know from speaking with a lot of agents that there is a very high percentage of cases where their buyers are bringing them houses and saying, these are interesting to me. I'd really like to see them. So already we know that because of consumer behavior, and also I'd like to point out that the age of the average home buyer and the generation that they came from as we move forward here, think about your kids who are adults, and my daughter who will be an adult. They are tech native people. They are accustomed to the help yourself find the information environment, and they go online for just about everything. And by the way, they also live in a world and a culture where they don't want to have to do a lot of interaction. Like, they'd rather, the old joke about like, I'll text you back 100 times, but if the phone rings, I'm not picking it up. Like, these are all behaviors. They're not just things we talk about. They're things that happen and have been happening for a long time. So now you have all this consumer behavior that's been evolving steadily over time, all of this access to data that's free and available. Now the spotlight has been put on the compensation that the listing agent, the seller's agent, and the buyer's agent are getting. So now not only are we talking about it, but people are going to start thinking to themselves, this is a lot of complexity. Do I need all of these services? How much of this process can I do myself?
You bring up a really good point. And this is, sometimes all of us, we get trapped in this where we're looking just through our lens and we think everybody thinks that way. And from our experience in working with clients at various ages, so we know young millennials, Gen Z, and alphas that are really now at the age where they're beginning to buy their first homes, think quite differently. They will look online. Let's just talk about Airbnb. They'll look online, they'll do a little bit of research, go, oh, that looks good. Look at the reviews, blah, 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 blah. Boom. And then they take a vacation and they stay in that Airbnb.
Yep.
Same with homes. I mean, we do loans for people that are buying in other states, sight unseen. Like we wouldn't, I don't do that. You know, I'm looking at some investment properties in Arizona. I live in California. I have an agent, you know, I'm talking to there, believe it or not. Like what am I going to do? Drive back and forth and go do no, I need somebody to help me out with this. But they will, you know, the majority of people find their own homes right now online. But if you're buying in the neighborhood that you live in and you know where you've been around, that's a little bit easier. But these younger generations, they'll look anywhere and they'll go online and they'll do their research and they'll pull it up and they're very comfortable with that process. So the mindset's a little different too. You know, it's interesting. So we'll talk about HomePie for a minute because, you know, I developed HomePie, came up with the idea years and years ago, but you and I sat down together. We kind of put together the model and started to wireframe it out. I guess it's like 4 years ago now. And the idea there, just in concept, was I saw a future where what was missing in real estate is the ability for people to buy and sell real estate directly from their computer or mobile device, directly between buyer and the seller, using technology to help with the process, right? And basically, I didn't think, and still don't think that is going to be the majority of people that do that. But I do think that there is maybe 25% of people that are comfortable with that process if they had the technology to do it, meaning they had the comfort, they knew that it was possible, they had something that would lead them through step by step to do that. And that's what we developed at HomePie, right? But with that, we've kind of proven through this model that it's really easy for sellers to use this model and sell their home, to, you know, kind of look at data, figure out a price. We give them the negotiation tool. We give them the ability to create a contract. I'm going to pause for a second to
Water.
Sure, we'll edit all this stuff. So, so we give them the tools to create a contract. We give them kind of that roadmap, right? So it's kind of akin to, you know, if you want to file your own taxes, use TurboTax step by step. So what's interesting about what might happen with all of this disruption is it might accelerate that model. It might put us in a position where people are think about like, wow, do I really need to pay a commission? I'm comfortable doing this. If I have a tool that allows me to do it, does it really open that up? Time will tell. You know, my belief is that there is a segment of society, and it's probably mostly the younger generation, that would be happy to do that, would be happy to, they don't, like you said, they don't necessarily like even interacting with people. Like they'd rather be anonymous online than be face-to-face with people. So, you know, maybe that's part of what the future does look like. It accelerates the technology. Most people are finding their own homes anyway today online. The portals like Zillow and, you know, Redfin, Realtor, Trulia, Homes.com. I mean, these major portals, they have tons of traffic and people are using those as tools to look for homes. So, will that same person that's going out there looking and finding their own home then be willing to do their own tour? I mean, you remember this in the very first pitch deck that I did for HomePie, it was that video pitch deck. So produced a video that really kind of portrayed what the future of real estate looks like. So the people that are a lot older will understand like the old, I think it was AT&T commercials, if I'm not mistaken, where it said, you know, have you ever seen somebody, you know, say goodnight to their kids right from the phone? And it was like, it happened to be a phone booth with a video in the phone booth of them saying goodnight, but it was like they predicted the future. And you look through some of those videos and you go, whoa, how did they know this was going to happen? So we created a video that was kind of like that, but it basically, at the end of the video, it's somebody wearing a VR goggle and walking through a home. Well, that's happening today. You see people with these meta goggles and so forth that are basically doing this virtual reality. So does that become part of this, right? Does that get accelerated where, Jamie, you decide to go by in, Charlotte, North Carolina, and you're like, I want to tour a couple of homes today. You don't have to jump on a plane and fly out there. You put on those goggles and the tour is already set up because you already did the video there. And you literally just walk through the home. You open doors, you look, you do this and that. And then you maybe do one physical inspection before you close just to make sure everything's still there. Like, maybe that's the future. So with HomeFly, we've really kind of thought about a lot of that stuff, and that's been part of the design. So maybe accelerate some of this. I still think that the human element has to be part of this transaction for some time. This is not something where it's like, buying or selling something on Facebook Marketplace, or even cars, like even using Carvana and some of those things. Like, it's a little bit easier to do that when they're certifying the car. Like, that's going to have to be part of this model where the house gets certified and you've got like a reliable report that somebody's gone through it and said, here are the things that are like upfront, not.
Yeah, like maybe the home
upfront,
inspection is something that the seller gets as they're, putting the house on.
Right. But okay, so now let's talk about those major portals. So what about Zillow? So Zillow's business model and revenue model has been based on giving real estate agents buyer leads, primarily.
Okay.
Buyer leads. And getting referral fees, more recently for those buyer leads. And there are a lot of businesses that today that are based on getting a referral fee, right, of that buyer agent commission. So they know that, let's just say on average, the buyer's agent earns 2.5%, and your referral, you're going to get 30% of that by referring that customer. Now, you may not get 2.5%. Maybe you're getting 2%. Maybe you're getting 1%. You're going to give up 30% of 1% as a buyer's agent that goes out there and spends, days and weekends and evenings and nights showing properties and then writing offers and not getting accepted and then having to write another one and, going through this over a week's period, and then give up your portion of that commission. Like, that is very unlikely. So what happens with these businesses? What do they do? What do they pivot to? There's a question. Like, I don't know the answer to it, but I mean, you saw Zillow's stock took a major hit when this judgment came out because people are thinking the same thing. Like, wait a minute,
absolutely.
Their business model is based on this. For some reason, that same hit was kind of a positive effect on CoStar, which owns Homes.com. Maybe people are thinking that, Homes has a different angle to this. They're not selling leads anyway. They're going to do something different. But, this is something to really think about. Off the top of my head, I can think of 4 or 5 different companies that have that model. And there's way more than that, but that have that model where it's really based on buyer's agent referral fee commissions. What happens with those companies?
All I know is I think that the time for the disruptors has come. I think it's been coming for a long time. And I think that this settlement, and provided the court proves it, but even if it doesn't completely prove the way that it's being submitted, again, the eyeballs, the attention, the spotlight is scrutinizing what do agents do and the compensation, and is it commensurate with the work performed? That alone leaves so much opportunity. And we talk about this beyond just the home buying process. It's in every industry. It really is just consumer behavior and the availability of information in our world, right? Yep. I mean, everything is evolving. We've talked a few times about, like Uber and Lyft and how, nobody could have ever imagined that we would be just blip, 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 popping in a car and off we go, right? I mean, but think about
somebody's car that you don't even know what it is. Like,
I mean, and then, the taxi industry was like, this is not what we want. that created a situation where they have to evolve. They have to align. They're competing now. There's somebody else in the mix doing something very similar to what they're doing and meeting the need. I think that we will see additional options for buyers and sellers to meet their needs. They're going to be creative and they're going to be different. And I think that, to your very good point, there's always going to be a place, at least for the foreseeable future, for the traditional models. And most especially, in my personal opinion, for buyers agents. Post-COVID, you saw people, or even during, moving because working from home is such a big thing now out of necessity. And then it just sort of evolved that they can work from anywhere, which has led lots of people to say, I don't have to be here. I can be wherever I want to be. Yep. That relocation is the part that, and I've also looked at places out of state. First thing I want to do is talk to an agent that's established and successful and knows the area well, because there's nothing that can compete with that or compare to that. But there is a very large segment of the population, we know this for a fact, as we've done the studies on it and research, who've already come to the conclusion that they want to try to affect essentially like a for sale by owner transaction. We've helped people through our roles in originating mortgages to do this over the years many, many times. So to have something that provides that solution in a very friendly way, I think it's going to have a lot more eyeballs and attention on it, and I think it's going to create some real opportunity there.
So thinking about it from a loan originator's point of view, like loan officers partner with buyer's agents all the time, like Absolutely. Both directions. They'll refer somebody, we approve. You're like, hey, you got to work with so-and-so. They're going to help you out on the buyer's side. But then also, like, people that go to the agent first will go, you have to talk to my loan officer. Go get pre-approved first. We need to make sure that you can qualify, how much down payment what you can afford. What if the majority of buyers look at this and go, wait a minute, I don't want to sign an agreement with an agent. I can find the property. I'm just going to go right to the listing agent and have them show me that property, or go to the open house. I think we're going to see a lot more open houses. But, in that case, if you're the listing agent, and let's say that you've agreed to 2.5%, you're not going to want to take the burden and responsibility and fiduciary duty of dual representation to guide that buyer through the process without a fee. So then will there be an additional fee, or will you agree with the seller to have a listing agreement that says, hey, I'll do 2.5%. We'll negotiate with a buyer's agent. If a buyer comes in without representation, then you have to pay me another 0.5% because I'm going to help them through the process. Like these are some of the big question marks. The other side of this that I think is not friendly to the consumer is, if you look at the statistics, 80% of lawsuits on transactions, residential real estate transactions, happen under dual agency.
Yes.
It is really tough to be a fight, to really truly be, and it's not without, bad intention. It's not saying that there's bad intention, but to really truly be a fiduciary to both. You've taken the listing agreement, you told the seller you're going to give them the best price, and now you got a buyer that has a completely different perspective that needs a different fiduciary to fight for them. And so when you're that dual fiduciary, when you have that dual representation, I just think it opens up a hill of beans, and that this will lend itself to maybe perpetuating a lot more of that, right? Let's talk about one other thing. How many sellers have you spoken with that complained that they paid too much for agent fees and that their agent didn't do anything for them?
Oh, we hear that a lot.
Yeah, you hear that a lot, right?
Yeah, especially a lot of our friends and clients who are property investors. And a lot of property investors, you can attest to this, they buy a lot of property in the same area, right? They'll choose an area so that's super easy to manage those properties, and they might buy several properties there. by the time they're on property number 2, 3, 4, 5, they're like, I already know the value. I know, the comps around me, comparables. I know all of this stuff. Like I can do this. I've done this before so many times now. Boom, I could do this as they're selling their investments. So it's a real thing. I mean, it's a thing
in a robust market, as we were in just a few years ago, when there's multiple offers or 5, 10, 15 offers a day gets listed, people feel like, well, wow, you didn't even really work for this. And you're going to make, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 on this. I think we heard that a lot. And in a market that's depressed, when there isn't that, and you're having to lower prices and take less for your property, which we haven't seen that in a number of years, but it'll come around again. Then you want to hold on to every dollar. So again, this kind of all leads me to think that we're entering this period of time where disruption is going to happen and it's going to be accelerated. So models like HomePie and others that are, even, the iBuyers, right?
Yep.
iBuying being where they pay all cash for it. That first started and they were buying at a discount because you have to. When you're flipping property, you have to buy at a discount. Market changes, you're stuck, right? Then they were buying for more and more. Then they were buying list price. They were buying over list price in order to get properties. That probably gets refined and becomes a more predominant tool for sellers. So look, we'll see where it all lands. In real estate, there's things that happen that are out of our control, whether it's the economy, regulation, lawsuits, it never stops, right? And so we have to adapt. At the end of the day, we're all going to come out of this in one way or the other. There will be the people that leave the industry entirely and they never come back. There'll be those that take a hiatus and they're gone and they wait till the dust settles and they'll come back. And then there'll be those of us that just kind of forge our way through and we take the battle and we figure it out and we just do the best we can. And at the end of the day, we figure it all out and we're still going to be here fighting. So, anyhow, it was just great to chat about it with you. It just kind of gets all our thoughts out there and, lets people think what's in our, see what's in our heads. But, we'll probably have more to say in the oncoming weeks and months. And so I think we should do this again. And maybe next time we bring in some other thought leaders and just have this chat and just see where it goes and see what we were right in our predictions on and what we weren't. What I like to say is either I'm going to be Nostradamus or I'm going to be like a weatherman and I'll never get it right. Right. I knew what the weather was yesterday, but I have no idea tomorrow.
Well, there's the thing. We know this. We know this from decades of doing this. We are resilient in the real estate and housing industry. We are resilient and we adapt and we evolve. And I expect that many real estate broker owners are already coming up with contingency plans and solutions for their agents. And I have absolutely no doubt that those really great agents that are out there bringing value to their clients, whether they're representing the seller or they're representing the buyer, they're gonna find their way through this and weather, because when you're good at what you do, when you do the right thing, when you're a master of your craft, there is always a place for you in this industry. It may look different. Things just may look different, whether we like it or not, but it doesn't mean that they're going to go away entirely. And so I think that for the agents out there that might be feeling nervous or afraid, continue to hone your craft, continue to be consistent. Don't stop doing the things that you've been doing that have been working for you. And look to your leadership. Look to your leadership for the direction that your organization is going in, and make sure you're aligned with somebody that's got a plan.
Yeah.
A plan for all the different things that could happen.
I think you're spot on. I'm glad you brought that up. And as you know, my son is a real estate agent, and I have other friends that, in fact, one of our wholesale reps was in here today, and his son is a real estate agent too. Look, we went through this in the mortgage industry, right? And we are still thriving, this 15 years later. You'll make it through. Things will be different. But if you love what you do and you're good at what you do and you let people know, you'll make it through this and it'll be figured out. There'll be a way. You'll make a living. You'll be able to still do very well. You'll be able to build whatever you want to build. It'll just be a little different. And that's what we did in the mortgage business when we came out of the crisis. The same thing will happen here. It's just really scary right now because we have no idea what it will look like. But 6 months from now, 10 months from now, a year from now, you'll know what the playing field looks like and you can excel on that new playground. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Great
All
chatting
right.
with you. I can't wait to have a follow-up chat and see what came true.
Very good. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. If
Thanks,
you have
everyone.
questions, you want to reach out to us, all the information is on our site, getreal411.com. Just reach out anytime. We're happy to have this discussion and help you out any way we can.
Have a great day.
Get Real 411 is hosted by Brad Rice and Jamie Cavanaugh, produced by Stuart Gelin, and recorded live from the AmeriFund Home Loan Studio in Simi Valley, California. You can learn more about the show at getreal411.com and watch full episodes on YouTube. If you're interested in being a guest on Get Real 411, email booking@getreal411.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.